Hey everyone. Welcome back to the channel. It's your boy, Six Path Weeb here. You're tuned into the ultimate spot for anime fanfiction, where imagination meets the shinobi world. Today, we're diving into part 2 of our epic story, Naruko, Queen of Illusions, where genjutsu isn't just an art, it's a weapon of royalty. Quick disclaimer before we dive in, this content is purely for entertainment and discussion. I don't own any of the anime footage shown here, all rights belong to their respective creators and copyright holders. Alright, let's jump in, things are about to get wild. 1 year later. Bored, so bored. Naruko Uzumaki sighed, dragging out the word as she stared at the classroom ceiling. It was yet another slow day at the academy. And no, not slow as in time is flying by, but the kind of slow where everything felt like it was moving at a snail's pace, especially when you already knew the material front to back. Naruko sat through Iruka-sensei's history lecture, which today focused on the formation of the hidden sand village and their techniques for gathering water in the desert. Fascinating? Sure. The first 5 times she'd read about it. But now? It felt more like review than learning. Still, she stayed respectful. Iruka-sensei was a good instructor, and she admired his dedication, even if the material felt repetitive. The first year at the academy had been exactly what she expected after hearing stories from older students. The beginner phase was designed to introduce young ninja to the basic concepts, traditions, and tools of the shinobi world. For a whole year, they went over the fundamentals, kunai, shuriken, chakra control, and history. A necessary foundation, yes, but for someone like Naruko who had picked up most of it on her own, it felt like running in place. That's why she often found her mind wandering, especially during lectures. She glanced to her left where Shikamaru Nara was already half asleep. She figured he probably knew all this already, too. Then there was Sasuke Uchiha, sitting beside her as usual. Naruko didn't exactly understand why he always picked the seat next to hers. Maybe it was coincidence. Maybe it was strategy. Maybe it was to avoid the large group of admirers that usually tried to crowd around him. Whatever the reason, she had stopped questioning it. Still, Naruko couldn't deny that she and Sasuke didn't get along very well. They were polar opposites, he was quiet and cool, while she was spirited and outspoken. Their interactions usually consisted of short exchanges that turned into verbal sparring. It wasn't that she hated him, it was more like their personalities constantly clashed. Sometimes their bickering would draw attention, and the intensity of their arguments would surprise their classmates. Naruko was never one to back down, and Sasuke didn't seem to be either. It wasn't anything mean-spirited, but their dynamic was anything but calm. Then there were the academy's fan groups, especially Sasuke's. Naruko had quickly grown tired of the attention some students gave him. While she could understand admiration, the constant competition and whispering grew old fast. In the beginning, some students had actually been interested in Naruko as well. Her bold personality and strong chakra reserves made an impression. But once people found out about her background, things changed. Whispers spread, and soon most of the students kept their distance, likely influenced by their parents' opinions. Oddly enough, Naruko found that to be a relief. Without all the extra attention, she could focus on her training. And not everyone avoided her. Choji, for example, was friendly and didn't let gossip guide his thoughts. He and Shikamaru were already best friends, and Naruko sometimes joined them. But their love of snacks, cloud watching, and long shogi matches didn't really keep her engaged. She was closer in energy to Kiba, who had a competitive streak and enjoyed the occasional challenge. The two had similar personalities, outgoing and a bit wild, but that similarity quickly turned into rivalry. After Naruko bested him in a sparring match during the first week, Kiba seemed to take things personally. He didn't dislike her, exactly, but he clearly saw her as a rival, and not in the friendly way. Naruko suspected it had something to do with the Inuzuka clan's unique sense of pride and tradition. Kiba's bold personality, combined with his loyal canine companion, made him stand out. Still, some of the things about his family, like their dog partners being able to speak, were just a little too unusual for Naruko, even with her open-mindedness. She shook off the thought, reminding herself not to judge. Every clan had its quirks, and hers was no exception. Then there were Hinata and Shino. Naruko had noticed Hinata's quiet glances and soft smile when they passed in the hallway. She wasn't oblivious, Hinata clearly admired her. That alone earned Naruko's respect. Despite what others said, Hinata held on to her own opinions. That kind of inner strength wasn't something Naruko saw often. Still, it was difficult to connect. Every time Naruko tried to talk with her, Hinata would get nervous and retreat into silence. Naruko understood and didn't push it, but part of her wished Hinata would open up more. As for Shino, he was polite and reserved. He didn't involve himself in gossip or arguments, and while they hadn't spoken much, Naruko appreciated his quiet support from afar. Despite the challenges, Naruko kept her head high. She wasn't at the academy to win popularity contests. She was there to grow stronger, to prove what she was capable of, and maybe even find her place in a world that didn't always make room for someone like her. And no matter how slow the lessons felt, or how hard the path ahead might be, she was determined to walk it her own way, with confidence, courage, and a whole lot of stubbornness. She knew that Naruko had feelings for her. She often observed from a distance, thinking Naruko was unaware. Although Naruko understood that she was shy and came from a proud and traditional clan, there had been plenty of opportunities to express those feelings openly. Instead, she seemed to prefer watching quietly as Naruko was treated with indifference and kept at a distance by the villagers. Naruko didn't hold it against her, after all, who would willingly associate with someone constantly misunderstood by others? But over time, despite her efforts to remain understanding, she began to feel a quiet sense of disappointment. Perhaps it was a moment of self-reflection, but Naruko couldn't comprehend how someone could care deeply for another and yet remain silent while they were excluded and judged. Eventually, she gave up trying to befriend her. Instead, whenever she noticed the girl trying to secretly observe her, Naruko would quietly move away, never giving her the chance to keep up. Shino was an Aburame, and with him, things were simple. If Naruko had to guess, he probably considered her an acquaintance, maybe even a friend, but their conversations were minimal. He was extremely reserved, one of the quietest people she'd met. Then there were Sakura and Ino, or as Naruko privately thought of them, the energetic one and the assertive one. Sakura was loud and enthusiastic, with vibrant pink hair and an obvious admiration for Sasuke. Due to their contrasting personalities, Naruko often found herself in disagreements with Sakura. Still, she never took things personally. When it came to academics, especially written tests, Naruko usually outperformed her, which brought her a bit of quiet satisfaction. Naruko didn't dislike Sakura, but their relationship wasn't close either. Sasuke, on the other hand, found the pair's attention overwhelming at times, and even Naruko could sympathize with that. It wasn't an easy situation for anyone. As for Ino, things were similar. Although she had a confident and strong-willed demeanor, Naruko didn't always see eye to eye with her. They clashed occasionally, but Naruko was never the type to retreat during an argument. It wasn't about pride, it was about standing her ground. Ino didn't particularly like Naruko, mostly because Naruko was known for speaking her mind. If someone challenged her, they knew she'd reply with honesty and determination. To Naruko, that was part of being a ninja, adapting, standing firm, and communicating directly, even if that meant a bit of witty back and forth. Naruko. How many times do I have to remind you? A familiar voice called out. She lazily lifted her gaze to find the source. Don't sleep in class. Naruko sat up, offering a sheepish smile. Sorry, Iruka-sensei. It won't happen again. Her voice carried a tone of boredom and fatigue, punctuated by a small yawn. Iruka walked over to the board, tapping it purposefully. That's what you always say, Naruko. Today, you'll be staying after class to review what you missed. That got her attention. Her eyes widened slightly, there was no way she wanted to stay late. I already know the material. Ask me something and I'll prove it, she offered, confident. If I get it wrong, I promise I won't sleep in class again. Iruka raised an eyebrow, considering. Alright, but this time, we're covering something new. We started a section on Zuko Namikaze today. Naruko's smile faltered slightly. Oh no. Of all the topics, it had to be that one. Zuko Namikaze was one of those legendary figures people knew little about. She had some information from conversations with Hiruzen, but she hoped she remembered enough of the important parts, especially the non-combat details the Academy preferred to focus on, like favorite foods. It was mushroom mixed soup, oddly enough. Now, Zuko Namikaze is remembered as one of the most renowned shinobi of his era, alongside the first Hokage and Madara Uchiha. What was the name of the unique ability he possessed? Naruko's grin returned. The ability was called the Geitrogen. With it, he was able to match both Madara and Hashirama in battle. The origin of the Geitrogen is unclear, but many believe it was a hereditary trait caused by a genetic mutation. Its abilities are still mostly unknown, though it's said to resemble the Sharingan in some ways. Her tone was calm and serious, without a trace of arrogance. Iruka was impressed, though he didn't show it. Very good, Naruko. Now let's talk about something more personal. Zuko was a great warrior, but what do we know about his family? Specifically, his wife? Naruko frowned slightly. These kinds of questions always felt oddly specific, but she paused to think. She remembered the story of Zuko's son, Bokuyo, how his father passed away before he was born, and his mother later fell ill. Bokuyo had grown up during a difficult time, and although he was an accomplished ninja, he had always struggled with the path his life had taken. She traced her memories, trying to recall the details she had uncovered during one of her visits to the Hokage's office. She knew Bokuyo had not inherited the Geitrogen, and that it had something to do with his mother's genetics. Suddenly, it clicked. Naruko's eyes lit up with realization, and she tapped the desk in excitement. Some students giggled at her reaction, but she paid no attention. Starting from the beginning, she recited, Bokuyo, Zuko's son, was thought to carry the Geitrogen. The council hoped to incorporate it into Konoha's known abilities, similar to the Sharingan and Byakugan. But after his passing, it was discovered that he lacked the necessary genetic traits. This was traced back to his mother's side. For the Geitrogen gene to be suppressed, it would require an equally powerful genetic presence, such as another dojutsu. That means Bokuyo's mother must have come from either the Uchiha or Hyuga clan. If I'm remembering correctly. Her name was Rei Uchiha? Her voice was confident, even if her last words sounded slightly uncertain. The class stared, surprised by her detailed explanation and reasoning. Iruka, however, was not. Over the last year, he had come to expect moments like these from Naruko. Very good, Naruko, the teacher said with a nod. Though it's pronounced Rei Uchiha. I haven't spoken about Bokuyo yet, but what you said holds true. He faced challenges from certain members of the council, who doubted him for not awakening his father's renowned abilities. His path wasn't easy, he lacked guidance and support. While many in the village admired him as though he were royalty, he found little joy in the life of a shinobi. The teacher paused thoughtfully before continuing. When Bokuyo passed, many believed that the Namikaze lineage had ended. But a few years later, it re-emerged through our fourth Hokage, his child, born sometime before his departure. That child, raised as an orphan, would later become one of the village's most honored leaders. The class listened closely as the teacher went on. The Namikaze were always seen as unique. They appeared during the Warring Clans era with Zuko and faded after just a few generations. Zuko gave everything to protect his companions, one of whom would become the first Hokage. Bokuyo lived a dutiful life as a shinobi despite his reservations, completing numerous important missions. And finally, there was the fourth Hokage, a student of the Toad Sage, considered the strongest of his time and cherished by the entire village. While he may not have possessed the sheer might of the first Hokage, he excelled in diplomacy and leadership where others struggled. During his short time as Hokage, peace reigned, and his wisdom was deeply respected. He smiled softly before adding, of course, as the saying goes, all good things must come to an end. Some say the fourth was expecting a child before his passing, though many dismiss it as just a rumor. The Namikaze name, unlike Uchiha or Senju, was rare. There was usually only one member alive at a time, yet the name alone carried such weight that even a child could be seen as formidable. Bokuyo himself was recognized across nations even before he became a ninja. Meanwhile, a certain blonde-haired Uzumaki sat quietly at the back of the classroom, observing her classmates. One of the advantages of sitting in the back was having a full view of the room. Naruko noticed Choji, Hinata, and some of the other students casting curious glances her way. It wasn't something she was used to, she couldn't quite figure out what those looks meant. Shikamaru, on the other hand, seemed deep in thought, perhaps trying to piece something together. Others looked her way with the usual expressions of competition, frustrated at how she had performed so well on the latest quiz. They never change, Naruko thought with a light smirk. She leaned back in her chair, balancing it on two legs as she put her feet up on the desk, a gentle thump echoing in the quiet room. Closing her eyes, she began humming a cheerful tune. Pop quizzes sure are fun. Despite the energy in the classroom, the teacher let out a long sigh. It had become a familiar habit lately. He was well into his later years, still serving as Hokage, and the responsibilities weren't getting any easier. Just in the past year, the situation with the Uchiha clan had occurred, a complicated matter that still gave him pause. But dwelling on it would only worsen the pressure he felt. He shifted focus. Danzo and his group continued to be a presence in the village. While they took on difficult assignments others couldn't, the Hokage remained cautious. Danzo had a history of pushing boundaries, and although things were calm for now, that could always change. Over the year, he had managed to calm the council, both civilian and shinobi representatives. Though disagreements still occurred, they weren't nearly as disruptive as before. Still, one question continued to surface again and again. Who will be your successor? At first, he'd found the question offensive, believing it suggested he was no longer fit to lead. But after a conversation with Shikaku Nara, he came to understand the concern. Every elder resists the idea of stepping down, and he was no exception. Accepting that age was taking its toll wasn't easy. The life of a shinobi was all he had ever known, and letting go of that identity felt like a tremendous change. He had stepped down once before, but in that case, there had been a clear choice. Even if Minato hadn't taken the mantle, Orochimaru might have made a remarkable Hokage as well. This situation was unlike any before. Though the village hidden in the leaves, Konoha, still held its reputation for producing highly skilled shinobi, retaining those talents had become a growing challenge. During its golden era, Konoha stood unmatched. Their strength was unquestioned, backed by powerful clans like the Uchiha, who produced elite shinobi every year, many capable of becoming Chunin, if not Jounin. The village also had legends in its ranks, Sakumo Hatake, Minato Namikaze, and the renowned Sanin. It wasn't that Konoha was weak now. They had recovered well and could still stand their ground against any village. But what they lacked was that exceptional, standout figure, someone capable of turning the tide in any situation for the village's benefit. That kind of presence was once there, but time had taken its toll. The current leader knew that, in his state, he might not fare well against his fellow Kage, should a challenge arise. And that was the issue, there was no clear successor. After the events surrounding the Uchiha incident, the two shinobi he once considered as possible successors were no longer viable options. One had passed away, and the other had left the village, becoming a missing nin. He had thought of Hiashi Hyuga, but while a respected clan leader, Hiashi lacked the independent strength and command required of a Hokage. Moreover, his clan's influence over him was a concern. Another candidate was Shikaku Nara. As head of the Nara clan, his strategic brilliance was undeniable. He could easily become the most intellectually gifted Hokage in the village's history. His clan techniques, paired with his sharp mind, made him powerful in his own right. However, Shikaku, like many in his clan, had little interest in leadership. They tended to avoid attention and only stepped in during critical moments. While capable, he wasn't eager, and the feeling was mutual. That left only two options: the remaining students of the third Hokage, members of the fabled Sanin, Jiraiya and Tsunade Senju. He sighed deeply, brushing a tired hand across his face. His former students had brought him no shortage of worries over the years. One hadn't spoken to him in ages, and yet still somehow managed to complicate his life from afar. Jiraiya was his preferred choice, the last loyal member of the Sanin. He had the strength, wisdom, and respect needed for the position. His experiences had made him world-wise, and he understood the balance of power. But Jiraiya had made it clear, he had no interest in becoming Hokage. Despite several attempts to convince him, the man had always refused. Beyond that, his contributions elsewhere were simply too valuable. Jiraiya led Konoha's intelligence network, which had kept the village informed and prepared time and time again. Without him in that role, the village would lose a significant strategic advantage. Jiraiya's dedication ran deep, so much so that he often put his responsibilities above personal relationships, including those with his own family. Despite caring deeply for his only known relative, he had little time to spend with her. Some wondered whether he feared being rejected for his long absence, or simply didn't know how to reconnect. Tsunade posed a different challenge. While she was incredibly gifted, especially in medical ninjutsu, her emotional nature and past struggles made her a risky candidate. Her tendency to act on impulse and her known habits were causes for concern. Still, the benefits of her return were undeniable. She was the finest medical ninja in the world, and having her back in Konoha would be an incredible asset. One of the Hokage's long-standing dreams was to ensure that 1 in every 10 active shinobi had medical training. With Tsunade's leadership, this goal could finally be realized. But convincing her to return seemed almost impossible. After the last great conflict, she had suffered great losses and chose to distance herself from the village, unable to fully recover. While another shinobi might have been labeled a deserter, he couldn't bring himself to sever ties with someone he once mentored. That was why he now sat waiting, hoping his invited guest would appear. Perhaps today would be the turning point. Or maybe he'd be forced to finally confront the man's elusive defiance. Kakashi. At the call of his name, a silver-haired shinobi gracefully descended from the ceiling, landing silently and taking a kneeling position out of respect. "Hi," he replied simply. His face partially concealed by a black mask and a slanted forehead protector, only his visible eye revealed anything of his mood. Wearing the traditional Onbu uniform, a faint mark of mission wear lingered, though the cracked dog mask at his hip was the only irregularity. Stand. Kakashi obeyed silently. The atmosphere remained professional, though not unusually tense. Anbu were trained to report swiftly and efficiently. Time was valuable to both the Hokage and the elite shinobi in his service. But this conversation wasn't about routine matters. The Hokage's serious gaze softened into a faint smile. No need for formalities, Kakashi. I'm sure you already know why I called you. As if waiting for the cue, Kakashi relaxed, leaning casually against the wall and pulling out his ever-present orange book. To the untrained eye, it might have looked like he was distracted, but the Hokage knew better. He had learned long ago not to underestimate Kakashi Hatake. The son of Sakumo Hatake, Kakashi had inherited remarkable talent. As the only surviving student of the fourth Hokage and a shinobi known to have mastered over 1,000 techniques, his contributions to the village were vast. More importantly, he still had untapped potential that could shape Konoha's future. And that was exactly why this conversation needed to happen. What she was about to do might seem reckless to many and would likely frustrate the man across from her, but she needed to approach this with careful strategy. Kakashi was clever, extremely so. He had a way of steering conversations in any direction he pleased, often without the other person realizing it. It was like a skill honed through years of observation and subtle persuasion. No illusions, no fancy techniques. Just quiet influence. Kakashi's voice pulled her back from her thoughts. Yes, Hokage-sama. You'd like my mission report? He didn't wait for confirmation. As expected, the rumors were accurate. Kiri is caught in internal conflict related to its bloodline clans. The assignment involving several of Yagura's key officials was a challenge, but... There's no need to go into detail, Kakashi, she gently interrupted. I take it the situation has been handled? He nodded with calm certainty. In truth, she was weary of this cycle. Kakashi always succeeded, his very presence confirmed that, and he had a reputation for flawless mission completion. He was steady and dependable, almost to a fault. As Kakashi made to leave, the Hokage gave a tired but warm smile. Not so fast, Kakashi. She gestured to the seat before her desk. There's something important we need to discuss, and I value your insight. The last heir of a distinguished lineage took the seat, a trace of curiosity passing across the part of his face that wasn't hidden. I'm willing to help, but I don't imagine there's anything I can do that you can't. Naruko shook her head lightly. She reached into her desk and brought out a pipe. This conversation may not bring you comfort, but I ask that you hear me out and do your best to understand. If her words affected him, he gave no visible sign. She carefully packed the pipe and set it aside. These thoughts began a few years ago, but recently they've grown strong enough to demand action. That's what brought us to this moment. As expected, Kakashi remained silent, preferring to listen and gather more information before speaking. She lit the pipe with a quiet fire technique, letting out a puff of smoke. I've spent years thinking about the night Orochimaru escaped. I felt I hadn't done enough, and that hesitation led to a series of events I wish I could undo. But I wasn't the only one caught off guard that night. That earned a reaction, perhaps surprise, perhaps reflection, but she couldn't tell. You understand what I'm referring to, don't you, Kakashi-kun? Naruko asked, her voice even. I do. His gaze dropped to the floor, not from shame but from the weight of memory. I made mistakes that day. I wasn't as experienced as I am now. I didn't have the same level of training. Naruko shook her head gently. I disagree. You were stronger back then, more determined, more focused. Over time, you've buried your emotions regarding Obito, Rin, and Minato. You've never fully moved forward, and it's taken a toll on you. That night taught me a lot about what drives you, and I realized that it was emotion. You've been carrying a heavy heart for too long. If it weren't for your skill, I might have already asked you to leave the Anbu. Kakashi stood, finally letting emotion surface. What did you expect? He asked, voice raised only slightly. I was overwhelmed. I followed your orders and tracked him. I had him cornered, but I froze. I wasn't prepared. You're upset? Naruko asked, calm as ever. You rarely react like this. Not in battle, not even in these kinds of talks. It tells me this conversation is long overdue. Kakashi began pacing slowly. You know exactly where this is going, he said. His voice was steady, but there was unease beneath it, something much deeper than frustration. He had spent years suppressing the past. But avoiding it had caused harm. This discussion was necessary. Naruko remained seated, composed. I'm not trying to provoke you. I understand. You had Orochimaru trapped, the strategy was in place, and still, He managed to break your focus with just a look. The intensity of his presence was enough to make you hesitate, and in that moment, he slipped away. Kakashi had no response. He didn't deny it, because it was true. We'll revisit that later, Naruko said gently. She was piecing everything together so that Kakashi could see the broader picture, the reasoning behind this conversation. A quiet moment followed, heavy with reflection. She was giving Kakashi time to process. So what's your point? He finally asked, his voice subdued and even. You're not blaming me for what happened, you couldn't stop him either. So what is this really about? For the first time, Naruko allowed herself a small chuckle, though it held no humor. People often see Kage as warriors, protectors, and symbols. The first was a symbol of peace. The second represented wisdom. As for me, I'm known as the embodiment of the will of fire. But what people forget, Anbu, villagers, everyone, is that we're still human. She stood and walked toward the portraits of the previous Hokage, Kakashi listening intently. She looked at each picture thoughtfully before continuing, her voice firmer. Being Hokage comes with a great burden, one I wouldn't wish on anyone. But one day, someone will have to take that burden from me. Someone I trust. Someone I respect. And most importantly, someone who still has the time and courage to make meaningful change. Kakashi's posture stiffened. He knew where this was going. I mentored 3 who could have taken this title. Jiraiya has always been too free-spirited. One of the others would simply refuse, and the third. Let's just say it wouldn't end well. That's why I asked you here. Before she could say more, Kakashi interrupted, his voice surprisingly strained. You know I'd follow any order. But this. I'm not meant for something like that. I've never truly succeeded at anything important. Obito. I couldn't fulfill his wish. I failed to protect Minato-sensei. I even struggled to be there for his legacy. His voice trembled as he sat down again, overcome by years of unspoken feelings. Naruko turned to face him, her expression serious and sincere. What's done is done, Kakashi. And let's be clear, you're not ready for this yet. You've spent too many years haunted by the past. Since Minato's passing, you've withdrawn. You live more in memory than in the present. You haven't allowed yourself to heal, and that's holding you back. She paused to let the words settle. Guy tells me he rarely sees you. Kenzo says the same. Hokage-sama, Kakashi said quietly, you know I've been doing all I can for the village, mission after mission. It's all I have. Hiruzen's expression hardened, quieting any immediate response. I don't believe a word of that explanation. I don't have an issue with your dedication to missions, in fact, I find it admirable that you care so deeply about serving the village, he said, though his voice carried a hint of sarcasm. What concerns me is how you've distanced yourself from your friends. And before you try to justify it, I'll stop you right there. There's no excuse for abandoning those bonds, not after everything you've shared with them over the years. Kakashi leaned back in his chair, feeling the weight of the truth behind the Hokage's words. He didn't enjoy being spoken to like a student, but deep down, he knew it was warranted. He had withdrawn from everyone, preferring the solitude of the memorial stone or the silence of his own home. So, you want me to reconnect with people? His eyes widened slightly as he connected the dots. If you're suggesting I accept a jounin role just for the sake of friendships, I'm going to have to decline. We agreed I'd remain in the Anbu a few more years. He hadn't meant to isolate himself, it just happened. One mission led to another, and then more. What started as weeks turned into years. Missions kept him focused, the rush and discipline dulled the memories he struggled to carry. I'll tell you exactly why I asked you here, and why I've said everything I have, Hiruzen said. He raised a hand, signaling the Anbu in the room to step out. What came next was meant to remain private. You were still a child when you became a Genin, his voice softened. Not even a year later, you earned the rank of Chunin at just 6 years old. Then you trained relentlessly, setting records until you achieved Jounin by 12. You remember the excitement in the village, don't you? You were everyone's inspiration. A slight smile crossed Hiruzen's face. I remember being woken up when you trained near the Sarutobi compound. Even though we were 5 minutes away, we could still hear the cheers from your supporters. Kakashi's expression was mostly hidden behind his mask, but a subtle smile gave away the hint of fond memories. No matter who it was, Danzo, civilians, anyone, they believed in your potential. You were the pride of your clan, the gifted son of Sakumo. You were already gaining nicknames and recognition while your peers were still fresh Genin or newly promoted Chunin. But then, things changed. One friend disappeared, then another, and finally your teacher. Each time you managed to carry on, but slowly, the spark faded. You became more reserved, your energy dulled. He paused, the next part difficult but necessary. Now let's take a step back and reflect. We have an older Hokage nearing the end of his service, and a young shinobi with unmatched skill but little drive, caught in the weight of the past. We're not so different, you and I. We're tired. We've both faced loss, and we've both drifted from who we were meant to be. But unlike me, you still have time. You're only 23, and the future is still yours to shape. You have the intellect, talent, and no one has matched your abilities in our entire system. Hiruzen turned away. That's why I'm placing you on leave. Kakashi stared at the floor, unmoving. The decision hit harder than he expected, and his voice trembled slightly as he responded, "What does that mean? What are you trying to accomplish?" The Hokage didn't stop walking. His tone remained calm, almost routine. You have 3 years, Kakashi. In that time, you will rebuild your connections. You'll make amends with those around you, and you'll train. Your strength is undeniable, but you've only scratched the surface of your potential. I don't care what drives you, whether it's to protect friends, to serve the village, or to live up to the expectations people once had for you. The ones Obito, Rin, and Minato had. This time, something lit up in Kakashi's eyes, an emotion he hadn't felt in years. And after the 3 years? Hiruzen paused at the doorway before answering. After that, I'll test you myself. If you pass, I will pass my title to you. You are my choice, Kakashi. Just as I once chose your sensei. And with that, he exited, well aware of the questions that would follow regarding the decision to temporarily remove one of the village's most skilled shinobi from active duty. Kakashi remained seated, frozen in thought. It felt as though a great burden had been lifted, and for the first time since his mentor's passing, he felt like he had a direction. A goal. A future to reach for. It was time to become the shinobi he was always meant to be. It's about time I get a rematch. Though going up against Sasuke always brings a bit of a thrill, Naruko thought to herself, standing in the middle of the training field in the academy's classic defensive stance. So far, it had been a good day. Sitting next to Sasuke was more pleasant than being around anyone else, mostly because she could be left alone. That was likely the reason Sasuke chose the same seat too. Naruko wasn't the type to pester or ask questions, and it made her easy to ignore when needed. This was something they both anticipated. It was her turn to face Sasuke again. She'd kept count, and she was sure he had too. They never spoke about it, but it was clear, both of them secretly looked forward to their matches. Sasuke was the only one who really challenged her. The others might try, but they couldn't truly match their level. The same went for Sasuke, only Naruko could push him that far. She adjusted her footing, left foot forward, right foot behind, loose fists held steady. Facing sideways, she locked eyes with Sasuke. Her arms trembled slightly. That always happened before a match with him. She could tell he felt the same. Are both fighters ready? Iruka stood on the sidelines with the other students, aware that this was the moment everyone had been waiting for. In any other sparring match, the crowd would cheer and shout encouragement. But when it was Naruko and Sasuke, the class fell completely silent. The only sounds would be their movements, techniques, and the clash of energy between two evenly matched opponents. A small, confident smirk tugged at Naruko's lips. Sasuke mirrored her expression with a brief nod. I declare the match, Naruko Uzumaki vs Sasuke Uchiha, begin. As the match began, the tension in the air grew thicker, neither fighter willing to make the first move. They observed one another closely, reading each other's stance and waiting for the perfect moment. Then, almost as if by silent agreement, both Naruko and Sasuke launched forward. Meeting at the center of the training field, Sasuke led with a quick punch, forcing Naruko to sidestep and roll away just in time to avoid a swift kick that nearly connected. You've gotten faster, Sasuke said, but so have I. With a confident grin, Naruko pushed off the ground and closed the distance in a flash, landing a punch squarely on Sasuke's shoulder, pushing him back a few steps. If Sasuke felt discomfort, he didn't show it. Regaining his balance just before reaching the edge of the spectator line, he rushed at her, this time sliding in low with a sweeping kick. Naruko leapt over him, but Sasuke managed to catch her ankle, twisting it slightly before she broke free with a sharp kick. Though the attack was blocked, it gave her enough space to recover. Naruko gave her leg a few testing shakes. Out of the two, she likely had the edge in speed, though only just. Sasuke, on the other hand, made up for it with refined technique and quick reflexes. He had a talent for turning any moment in battle to his advantage, landing strategic blows that could wear an opponent down. Naruko had been fortunate so far, relying on her agility to dodge just in time. She gave a confident smile. "So, we're going all out from the start? I can work with that." With barely a pause, she launched forward at full speed, moving so fast the other students could barely track her. She reappeared in front of Sasuke with a punch aimed at his face, following up with a flurry of strikes targeting his upper body. But Sasuke was quick to adjust, blocking and dodging with calm precision. Naruko continued pressing forward until Sasuke ducked under an uppercut and countered with one of his own. Naruko stumbled back slightly, feet wide for balance, but didn't fall. Sasuke immediately followed up with his own series of quick strikes, aiming punches high and kicks low, keeping Naruko on the defensive. "All it takes," he murmured while rolling forward under her swing, "to stop a sparrow." He nudged her leg, causing her to kneel. "Is to take the wings." Each word was marked by a precise elbow to her side. Naruko held her ground and grit her teeth. "Or you can just aim higher." With a fierce motion, she drove her arm forward, sending Sasuke flying back, crashing through a wooden training dummy before skidding to a stop. Both fighters rose to their feet again, Naruko now favoring one leg slightly, and Sasuke's nose and chin showing signs of strain from the earlier impact. "Give up, Naruko," Sasuke called, not with arrogance, but calm certainty. "You won't beat me without your speed." He wasn't wrong. Naruko's mobility was her strongest asset. When it came to raw strength, they were evenly matched, but Sasuke's technical growth pushed him forward. Still, Naruko wasn't out of options. She pulled out 2 kunai and assessed herself. The pain wasn't too bad, she could still move quickly, just not effortlessly. With determination, she zigzagged toward Sasuke, her rapid approach catching him off guard. Right before reaching him, she leapt into the air, hurling both kunai to his sides. Sasuke's expression changed, her confident smirk gave away that something else was coming. Reading the situation correctly, Sasuke jumped back, and just in time. A razor-thin wire hidden between the kunai sliced the air where he'd been standing. Naruko landed with a light thud, pushing through the ache in her leg. "You're not the only one who can use ninja wire," she said with a wink. Iruka, watching from the side, sighed quietly. Why do their sparring sessions always get this intense? He was starting to consider whether these two should even be allowed to train against each other anymore. Things always got too competitive. Sasuke, now with a sheen of sweat down his back, mentally scolded himself for falling for the same tactic he once used. He had underestimated Naruko's resourcefulness. She was a true ninja, creative, determined, and never one to back down. Though she liked doing things her own way, she never hesitated to adapt if it meant winning. He respected that. But he didn't plan on losing. This is going to come down to more than taijutsu, Sasuke thought. Time to switch tactics. He charged forward, forming hand signs as he ran. Fire style, fireball jutsu. The crowd, including Iruka, gasped as a large burst of flame surged forward, glowing orange and fierce. Behind the flames, Sasuke flung kunai and shuriken, adding to the intensity. Sasuke was certain the match was over. He'd been perfecting that technique for weeks, and using it here was a bold move. Naruko's surprised expression before the fireball launch told him she hadn't expected it. He turned away, confident. She was tough, but this was beyond her now. Suddenly, a familiar voice rang out. "Sasuke, seriously? Do you have any idea how much trouble you just caused me?" Sasuke's eyes widened. He turned to see Naruko completely unharmed, a sealing tag floating gently in front of her. Her skills in Fuinjutsu had grown steadily since the Hokage had introduced her to it. She had been practicing constantly, and now, she always carried protective tags for situations just like this. Sasuke smirked, a rare spark of excitement in his eyes. "So, the quiet one's got more tricks up her sleeve. Good." He hadn't felt this challenged in a long time. He missed this, pushing his limits, testing his strength against someone who wouldn't give in easily. Naruko beamed, her grin full of spirit. "Time to win this match and maybe earn that promotion," she said playfully. "Let's go, Sasuke." She tossed the used tag over her shoulder, where it fizzled and popped in a harmless burst of smoke and light. She loved the drama. Even if her tags didn't always work perfectly. Dear YouTube family. That's all for today. If you enjoyed the content, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel for more awesome videos. With appreciation. 6 Path Weeb.